Roland and Jake stood at the edge of the vast desert, their eyes fixed on the looming mountains ahead. The sun beat down mercilessly on their backs. Sweat trickled down their faces, leaving trails in the dust-caked skin. "We made it, Jake," Roland said, his voice gruff but tinged with relief. The boy nodded, too exhausted to speak. They had crossed the endless sea of sand. Now, a new challenge awaited them. The gunslinger squinted at the jagged peaks. They seemed to scrape the sky itself. He knew the dark tower lay beyond. It called to him like a siren's song, a destiny he couldn't ignore. Jake took a swig from his canteen. He offered it to Roland. The man accepted with a nod of thanks. Their supplies were running low. The mountains might offer water, but also new dangers. The desert sand gave way to loose scree. Each step became a struggle. Roland led the way, his weathered boots finding purchase where Jake's smaller feet slipped. The boy's determination never wavered. "Watch where I step," Roland instructed. His voice was calm but firm. Jake nodded, mimicking the gunslinger's movements. The air grew thinner as they climbed. Breathing became a conscious effort. Jagged rocks tore at their clothes. The wind picked up, howling through narrow passes. It carried the scent of snow from higher peaks. Roland's eyes scanned constantly for danger. In this world, threats could come from anywhere. Jake stumbled, catching himself on a sharp outcropping. Blood welled from a cut on his palm. Roland paused, turning back. Without a word, he tore a strip from his shirt. He bandaged the boy's hand with practiced ease. They reached a narrow ledge. It hugged the mountain face, barely wide enough for a single person. Far below, jagged rocks waited. The wind tugged at their clothes, threatening to pluck them from the cliff. Roland went first. His steps were sure, his balance perfect. Jake watched, heart pounding. The gunslinger turned, extending a hand. "You can do this," he said. His blue eyes held steady confidence. Jake took a deep breath. He placed one foot on the ledge, then another. Roland's hand remained outstretched, a lifeline. The boy inched forward. Loose pebbles skittered over the edge. He didn't look down. "That's it," Roland encouraged. His voice cut through the wind's howl. Jake focused on it, blocking out the vertigo. Step by step, he made his way across. Roland's grip was iron as he pulled the boy to safety. As night fell, they found a sheltered overhang. Roland built a small fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the rock face. Jake huddled close, grateful for the warmth. They shared a meager meal of dried meat. "Why do you seek the tower?" Jake asked. His voice was quiet, almost lost in the crackling fire. Roland was silent for a long moment. The flames reflected in his eyes, hinting at memories best forgotten. "It's my destiny," he finally said, "and my curse." Jake nodded, sensing the weight behind those words. He didn't press further. Roland's past was a mystery, but their present was shared. The gunslinger looked at the boy. In Jake he saw innocence long lost, a reminder of what he fought for. "Get some sleep," Roland said gently. "Tomorrow will be harder." Jake curled up, using his pack as a pillow. Roland kept watch, his hand never far from his guns. Dawn broke, painting the mountains in hues of pink and gold. The beauty was deceptive. As they climbed higher, the air grew colder. Icy wind cut through their clothes like knives. Jake's teeth chattered uncontrollably. Roland fashioned crude wraps from a blanket. They helped, but barely. Every step became a battle against the cold. The path narrowed, forcing them to climb near vertical faces. Jake's fingers grew numb, making each handhold a risk. "Roland, we need to find shelter," Roland shouted over the wind. Jake nodded, too cold to speak. They pressed on, scanning the mountainside for any refuge. The gunslinger's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Hours passed. The cold seeped into their bones. Just as despair threatened to set in, Roland spotted a dark opening, a cave sheltered from the wind. They stumbled inside, collapsing on the rocky floor. For now they were safe from the elements. As they rested in the cave, a figure appeared at the entrance. Both Roland and Jake tensed, hands moving to weapons. The stranger raised empty palms. "Hax, I mean no harm," he called. "I bring news." Roland studied the man. He was thin, with haunted eyes. "Roland." "Speak," the gunslinger commanded. The stranger introduced himself as Hax. He was a traveler like them, but his news was grim. "Hax, the forest ahead is not safe," Hax warned. "Creatures stalk the shadows. They hunger for flesh and fear." Jake shuddered at the description. Roland's face remained impassive, but his eyes hardened. Hax shared what food he had. In return, Roland offered him shelter for the night. As they slept, the gunslinger kept one eye open. In this world, trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. Morning came, and with it, a decision. Despite Hax's warning, their path led through the forest. Roland and Jake bid farewell to the messenger. They descended the mountain, entering a world of green shadows. The trees loomed overhead, ancient and gnarled. Mist clung to the ground, obscuring roots and rocks. Every sound seemed muffled. Jake stayed close to Roland, eyes darting at every rustle of leaves. "Roland, remember your training," Roland murmured. Jake nodded, hand resting on the small knife at his belt. The gunslinger had taught him well. Still, fear gnawed at the edges of his mind. They moved carefully, alert for any sign of danger. Hours passed in tense silence. The forest seemed to watch them, waiting. Roland's instincts screamed that something was wrong. But the attack, when it came, still caught them by surprise. Section 8. The abandoned fort. Just as the forest's gloom threatened to overwhelm them, they stumbled upon a clearing. In its center stood a fort. Its walls were weathered stone, covered in vines. It looked long abandoned. "Shelter," Roland said, his tone cautious but hopeful. They approached warily. The gate hung open on rusted hinges. Inside, they found overgrown courtyards and crumbling buildings. But the walls still stood strong. Jake explored, his earlier fear replaced by curiosity. He found old weapons, rusted but still recognizable. Roland examined the defenses, his tactical mind assessing weak points. The fort could be a haven if they could hold it. As night fell, they barricaded the gate. Roland set traps along the walls. Jake gathered wood for a fire. They ate sparingly, saving their supplies. Both knew that tomorrow would bring a test of their preparations. Section 9. Creatures of the Night. The attack came with the deepest dark. Howls echoed through the forest. Inhuman shapes clambered over the walls. Roland's traps caught the first wave, but more kept coming. The night air filled with gunshots and screams. Jake fought alongside Roland, his knife flashing in the moonlight. The creatures were grotesque amalgamations of beast and man, teeth gnashed, claws raked. But the boy stood his ground, courage born of desperation. Roland was a whirlwind of destruction. His guns never seemed to empty, each shot finding its mark. But for every creature that fell, two more took its place. The tide of battle pushed them back towards the inner keep. Blood and sweat mingled on stone floors. Jake's arms burned with exhaustion. Roland's face was a mask of grim determination. They fought back to back, a duo against a horde. The night seemed endless, a nightmare made real. Section 10. Victory and Resolve. As dawn broke, the creatures retreated. The fort's courtyard was littered with bodies. Roland and Jake stood among the carnage, battered but alive. They had held through the night, victory hard-won and costly. Jake slumped against a wall, adrenaline fading. Roland checked him for injuries, his touch gentle despite blood-stained hands. They had both changed in the night. The boy had become a warrior. The gunslinger perhaps remembered what it was to protect. "You did well," Roland said, his voice gruff with pride. Jake managed a tired smile. They cleaned their weapons in silence. Both knew this was only the beginning. More challenges lay ahead on the path of the Dark Tower. As the sun rose higher, they gathered what supplies they could find. The fort had served its purpose, but they couldn't linger. Roland's eyes turned to the horizon. Somewhere out there, the tower waited. Its call was stronger than ever. Section 11, the journey continues. They left the fort behind, stepping once more into the forest. Jake walked taller now, his eyes sharper. Roland noted the change with quiet approval. The boy was growing into a true companion for the long road ahead. "How much further?" Jake asked. Roland shook his head. "Distance doesn't work the same here. We walk until we arrive." The answer was frustrating, but Jake accepted it. He was learning the ways of this strange world. The forest gradually thinned, giving way to rolling hills. In the far distance, a dark shape loomed. Too far to make out clearly, but its presence was undeniable. The Dark Tower, their ultimate goal. It seemed to watch them, patient and eternal. Roland and Jake paused, taking in the view. The journey ahead was long and fraught with danger, but they had each other and they had purpose. With renewed determination they set forth. The tower called and they would answer, no matter